Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The French princess whose severed head was paraded throughout Paris. The French Revolution was a shocking and brutal time in which thousands of people lost their heads on the guillotine. Each day, dozens of people were being executed to the point where inside of Paris the cobbled streets ran red with the blood of the victims. It was a time of terror, and where anyone who was considered a sympathiser with the former king and queen, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, would be liable to a date with the executioner. But there was one French princess who would be executed also, and she was a close confidant of Marie Antoinette. Marie Therese Louise of Savoy was also the heiress to the greatest fortune in France. But following her execution, her remains would be subjected to a harrowing ordeal that encapsulated the brutality and barbarism of the French Revolution. Marie Therese was a close companion of Queen Marie Antoinette in France. It was dangerous, as there would be a great degree of hatred throughout the country towards the king and queen. Across France, people were starving and were suffering heavily with the price of bread rising sharply, and the Queen in particular became a subject of ridicule and animosity. She and her royal court were spending large sums of money on jewellery, clothes and furniture to decorate their palaces, and because of this the French people turned on them. They were desperate, and then the outbreak of revolution would occur, and eventually the king and queen would be overthrown. Marie Therese was a princess, and she was, as mentioned, a very rich lady, but she would be known as the Princess de Lamballe, and she spent a lot of time with the Queen. Her friendship with the Queen was well known, and one ambassador stated, "Her Majesty continually sees the Princess de Lamballe in her rooms. This lady joins too much sweetness of very sincere character, from far intrigue and all such worries." The Queen has conceived for some time a real friendship for this young princess, and the choice is excellent, for although a Piedmontese, Madame de Lamballe is not at all identified with the interests of Madames de Provence and d'Artois. All the same, I have taken the precaution to point out to the Queen that her favour and goodness to the Princess de Lamballe are somewhat excessive, in order to prevent abuse of them from the quarter. The pair were close friends. However, during the French Revolution, Marie Therese joined the royal family in a palace in Paris, and she tried to support them where she could. But still, the frivolities of court occurred, and dances and entertainment went on whilst people outside were incredibly angry. She remained by the Queen's side, but Marie Therese would then flee, and she would come to Britain, where she wrote a will, and she knew that if she went back to France, she would be liable to punishment and even execution. She knew it was dangerous, but she nevertheless went back to Paris and resumed working for the Queen, and she would try to get support for Marie. The palace eventually was attacked, and with this she was arrested, and was then transferred to the Force prison. She was then sent to the Temple, and Princess Marie Therese had a harsh imprisonment. But during the September massacres, the prison was attacked by mobs and rioters, and the inmates were hastily brought in front of a tribunal where judges ordered their executions. Each prisoner was asked some questions before they were either allowed to leave or were sentenced to death. Massacres continued of the prisoners, but Marie Therese was too well known and famous to be smuggled out of the prison. All the women prisoners, almost, who were tried before the tribunals at La Force prison were freed, but others were close to the royal family, were not. However, on the 3rd of September 1792, Marie Therese was taken out to a courtyard with other prisoners awaiting being taken to a tribunal. She was brought before this hastily gathered court, and she was ordered to take an oath to prove liberty and equality, and to swear hatred to the king and queen and to the monarchy. She agreed to support the principles of the revolution, but refused to denounce the king and queen. She was then ordered to be taken away, and her trial was said to have gone like this. "Who are you?" "Marie Therese Louise, Princess of Savoy. Your employment, superintendent of the household to the Queen. Had you any knowledge of the plots of the court on the 10th of August? I know not whether there were any plots on the 10th of August, but I know that I had no knowledge of them. Swear to liberty and equality, and hatred to the king and queen. Readily to the former, but I cannot to the latter, it is not in my heart. Reportedly, agents of her father-in-law whispered to her to swear the oath to save her life, upon which she added, I have nothing more to say. It is indifferent to me if I die a little earlier or later. I have made the sacrifice of my life. Let Madame be set at liberty. She was then taken by 2 guards to the doors where massacre was taking place. When the door was opened, she saw the corpses all in the prison yard, and she screamed, I am lost. A killer described her as a little lady dressed in white, but then she was struck by a man who was armed with a pike, who hit her on the head. This caused her hair to fall to her shoulders, and in her hair was a hidden letter from Marie Antoinette. Marie Therese was then wounded on the forehead, and she was bleeding before the crowd then stabbed her to death. But the treatment of her remains after her death was shocking. It was claimed by many witnesses that her corpse was undressed, eviscerated, and was beheaded, and that Marie Therese, the Princess of Lamballe, had her head then paraded throughout the streets of Paris on a spike. Her body was then dragged after by a crowd of people who screamed her name. People also purchased bits of her hair, and some reports say that her head was taken to a nearby cafe, where it was placed in front of the customers who were asked to drink in celebration of her death. After this it was then taken to the temple, where the head of Marie was paraded beneath the window of Marie Antoinette the Queen and the princess's great friend. Marie was not present in the room at the time and did not see it, but many claimed that she did scream when she heard about this. Those that carried the head of the princess wanted the queen to kiss the lips of her former favourite, and they wanted to be given access to show the queen the head of Marie Therese Louise of Savoy. It was said the municipal officer had the decency to close the shutters, and the commissioners kept them away from the windows. One of these officers told the king, They are trying to show you the head of Madame de Lamballe. Mercifully, the queen then fainted away. Following this, the head and corpse was then taken to the Palace Royal, where a party was taking place, and the Duke of Orleans, when seeing this, said, Oh, it is Lamballe's head. I know it by the long hair. But the crowd then continued to parade her remains. Men loyal to her father-in-law tried to get hold of the remains, and they infiltrated the mob to get these to be displayed before the home of Marie Therese. The carrier of the head then entered an alehouse and left the head outside, where one man then stole the head and had it buried in a nearby cemetery. Some accounts claim that her body was delivered much quicker to the authorities for burial, but the procession of the head of the French princess was not disputed, and it showed the brutality and anger of the crowd. At some point, Madame Two Swords would make a death mask of her head, but the body of Marie Therese of Savoy would not be found. But the treatment of her remains in death was shocking, as her head was paraded throughout the streets of Paris. She was seen as a symbol of the Queen, as she was great friends of her, and because of this, she was, in the eyes of the revolutionaries, liable for execution. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.